Now on release in Australian cinemas is a film called The Way, My Way. And it's my great pleasure to be speaking to the writer-director of The Way, My Way, Bill Bennett. Bill, welcome to Movie Metropolis.
Thank you, Peter. Lovely to be here.
Great to talk to you. And this is so intriguing, this film, because it's based on your own memoir of journeying on the El Camino de Santiago. Um, Tell me about your process in deciding to make the film the way you have.
Well, look, I have to say up front that it is not a film that I set out to make. Really, I didn't want to make this film. How it came about was that I walked the Camino in 2013. I got to Santiago, and 800 kilometers later, my walk had been burdened by pain in my knee. I had enormous pain throughout most of the walk. I got to Santiago and I wondered, well, what just happened? Why did I do this walk? And so I decided to come back home to Australia and write a book to try and get closure on it all, hoping that in the writing of the book that I would really find the reasons for why I did the walk. I really didn't know why I was doing this walk. The book became quite popular, and then a distributor contacted me and said, I think there's a film in this, to which I immediately said no. I didn't want to make a film about myself, and I didn't think that I could make a film about myself. I didn't think that it was possible to do that. But he was really quite insistent, and so I found a way to do it. And principally, the way I found to do it was to treat myself not as myself, but as this third person character who was kind of interesting because he was so self-absorbed and egocentric and so messed up that he was kind of amusing, because he didn't realize that he was just such um, a stubborn, self-absorbed person.
Hmm.
And then I thought, well, okay, so if you can take that guy on a journey, then maybe it becomes interesting. But throughout the whole process of making the film, Peter, I never saw myself as myself. It was always this other person distance from me.
Now, that is so interesting to hear because my first reaction was, here is a docudrama where you've dramatized the events that happened to you, and you have Chris Haywood playing yourself. But then what you seem to be saying is it's more fictionalized isn't perhaps the right word, but a more created narrative based on your own story.
No, everything that happens in the film actually happened. So to that extent, and I mean everything, and even down to um, places where events happened while I was on my walk. I went back and recreated in those exact same places. The pilgrims that I met along the way in the film are in fact the same pilgrims that I walked with 10 years earlier.
Ah.
So the people featured in the movie are the same people that I met and walked with on my original pilgrimage in 2013. They came back to play themselves 10 years later. But the style at times is documentary, you might say, but only in the same way that, say, something like Nomadland is,
Ah.
or even the Bourne movies. The Bourne movies have adopted this very sort of um, almost social realist style. But as you know, the film, having seen the film, the film is at times very cinematic, very much a movie, but at other times it slips into this quite realistic sort of observational style of shooting, which only I think adds to the authenticity of the film. In the end, the reason that I made the creative choices that I made were to bring home the fact that this was an authentic tale, not even tale, recreation of my walking the Camino.
Well, it certainly comes across that way, and the journey is quite a powerful one at times with the various people that you meet. And it is so interesting that you have the people that you did meet. Some of them have returned to be part of the film, and you've got a few actors in there as well.
Yeah, look, it was a risk because they're not actors. And people think people might think, oh, look, it's easy. They just come back and play themselves. It's not easy at all. You
No,
put a non-professional person in front of a camera with a whole film crew around them and playing opposite a professional actor, and it's intimidating, and that sense of intimidation, 9 times out of 10, shows in the performance. I have, over a period of many years and many films, developed a technique and a method of working with not the beams don't show, the wheels turning don't show.
yeah.
I think somebody watching this movie would be hard pressed to tell which are the professional actors and which aren't the professional actors.
Mm. No, I agree with you. That's fair enough. It's really well done. Chris Haywood is terrific. Was he your first choice?
No, it wasn't my first choice. At one point, it was going to be a bigger budget film, budget of 10, 12 million. And so that required star casting. And I went out to the stars, for that to trigger the financing. I always felt uncomfortable with that because it didn't seem to me the right way to do this film. If you're going to do something on the Camino, you can't, for a start, you can't impede the ebb and flow of the Camino. You can't stop pilgrims from walking each day. And a big movie set and a big movie crew would have required that. We would have had to lock down sections. We would have had to have crowd control. We would have had to bring extras in, the whole thing. That never sat comfortably with me, but I was sort of, I don't know, going along with it. But then for one reason or another, we couldn't get the stars that we required to trigger the financing, and the whole thing started to peter out. And then I just thought, no, that was the wrong way to do it. Let's find a way to do it where I don't have to have star casting, where I can have a smaller crew, where we can do this so that we have a tiny footprint, if you like, and meld into the day-to-day workings of the Camino so that we become a part of the Camino. And when I made that decision, Chris then was my first choice, because Chris and I go back 40 years to when he
Mm.
played the lead in my first film, A Street to Die, for which he won the AFI Award for Best Actor.
Yep. Yep. No, really interesting to hear that. And did it take you a long time to cast Jennifer Cluff?
Mhm. Well, Jennifer is my wife.
I
We've been married
know.
for 42 years now. And coincidentally, she played opposite Chris in that very first film, A Street to Die.
Ah,
She played Chris's husband in that film. So there was there was this symmetry there from that point of view.
mm,
Jennifer is an actress that goes back to her playing the pivotal role of Judy in Seven Little Australians when she was 16 years old.
uh-huh.
She comes from an accomplished theatre background. She hasn't played a role for quite some time, but once again, people think, well, Jennifer's role was just a matter of playing herself. It's much more complicated than that. She I look at her performance and it's absolutely first rate.
Yes, absolutely agree. I agree. No, the whole thing works so well. Tell me the shooting process because, as you say, the logistics and all that with a smaller crew, etc. Shooting at the Camino, El Camino de Santiago would have been not easy. Was it a long shoot?
It was a 5-week shoot in Spain and a 1-week shoot in Australia. We shot a mixture of 5 days and 6-day weeks. It was my priority in really setting up the shoot was always going to be light. I really wanted to shoot in beautiful light, which meant shooting either very, very early in the morning or quite late in the afternoon.
Mm.
Um, and you'll know from having seen the film, Peter, that the light plays a very important part in the
Yeah.
whole overall tone of the film. Um, but for reasons of logistics and cast availability and that sort of thing, we had to shoot out of sequence. But we traversed the whole entire Camino, 800 kilometers, about 3 times in the making of the film. We went
Oh,
backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards. But I wanted to, once again, for reasons of authenticity, I knew that this film would be scrutinized by Camino diehards, and they'd be looking to pick up any sort of um, cheats or tricks or any kind of errors. So I was absolutely fastidious in making sure that we got everything geographically correct and correct in terms of the protocols and mechanics of the Camino.
well done on that, because I've seen a few other films or documentaries really on pilgrims who have journeyed El Camino de Santiago, and you seem to have got that right in terms, as you say, of the lighting, of the look of the place, and of the spiritual aspects as well. That is part of the whole pilgrimage.
Well, after having done that first Camino in 2013, I've since done 5 more.
Ah,
Um, so I have, and in fact, pretty much all my friends now are Camino people. Um, so I have an acute understanding of um, the pilgrim mindset, if you like. And whilst I did the pilgrimage not being a religious person, before I set off in St. John Pied de Port, which is the starting place, the set-off point for the Camino Frances, that morning I set off. I went into the church there just by the gates, the medieval stone gates that are the commencement of the Camino. And I spent a little bit of time there just reflecting on what it was that I was undertaking. And periodically through my journey, I would stop in and spend time in the churches and the cathedrals. And again, I'm not a Catholic, but I just felt that if you walk the Camino, then you have to be respectful to to what it is, to the holy and the sacred nature of it. And I just felt that that was um, an important part for me for doing a pilgrimage.
yeah. Okay. Now, as you say, you've done the pilgrimage now quite a few times. Has it changed you in any particular way?
It's 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 changed me profoundly, Peter. I now classify my life as being pre-Camino and post-Camino.
Yeah.
The impact that it's had on me has been that profound. But these things don't happen overnight. They don't they kind of creep up on you, and it's only when you look back on it sometime later and you think, my goodness, I've gone from there to there. One of the things that really was an agent for change for me was this really bad knee that I had. It put me into enormous pain, but that pain humbled me, and I I realized later, really kind of it knocked the hubris from me. It knocked arrogance out of me. It knocked pride. It knocked ego. All of these things. I mean, I thought going into the Camino, I was pretty fit. I trained a lot. I thought I'm going to smash this. I'm going to crush this. I'm going to build this out of the park. But
Mm.
but this knee hobbled me, and in the hobbling, it humbled me. And I got to Santiago at the end, having gone through 31 days of very real pain. And I look back on it now and I realize that had I not had I not had that pain, had I not been challenged by that pain, I wouldn't have had the transformative change that I had.
how interesting to hear that, and how film has given you that sort of journey and that sort of development. And I must say, I was getting very attached to that towel,
Mhm.
which obviously had meaning.
Well, in retrospect now, I call it the MacGuffin. Being a film person, you'd understand what that term means.
Yes.
Um, and for people who haven't seen the film, I'll just very quickly explain. I got to Pamplona, which was about 70 kilometers into the 800-kilometer walk, and the pain in my knee was just so bad. I'd met this fellow in a taxi, and he gave me his high-tech towel and said, "Keep the towel, use it to wrap ice around your knee to reduce pain, um, and see you later." And off he went. We become, in a very short period of time, we become quite close friends. And I stayed in Pamplona for a day. It was recommended that I stay between 3 and 7 days, but that just wasn't going to work with me.
Mhm.
Um, and then I set off, and I got it in my head that I needed to give this towel back to this bloke. And here's where it became a MacGuffin, because there was no real need for me to give it back to him.
Mm.
He wasn't expecting it back, and in fact, I could have posted it back to him
Yeah,
if I wanted to.
such an interesting
But I
story.
had there to Santiago and hand it back to him personally. It was
Yes.
sort of like, yeah, and I call it a MacGuffin because it was really unnecessary.
Yeah.
Hit that word, didn't he? It was a Hitchcock.
Yes.
And um, but what that towel was for me was, it was a mechanism for me to keep going.
Mm.
It was my sort of bunny rabbit, on that mechanical bunny rabbit, the dogs chase.
Yep.
The- Going round, going round and round
Yeah.
the oval.
Yep.
That's what it was for me. I kind of fixated on giving this towel back to this bloke. And as one of the pilgrims, a lovely woman pilgrim, points out in the film, well, why are you doing this? Is this male ego? Are you doing this just to prove something to yourself or prove something to him, that you're not old and past it? And, so it actually goes into some quite sort of complex areas of ego and pride, and the concerns about getting old, all of these sort of things.
Exactly. All of that is part of your film, which is really well put together, I thought. You've just come back from overseas. The film has been journeying to a number of film festivals or places before its release in Australia now. What have your experiences been like at those various screenings overseas?
Well, the film is currently screening at the Cannes Film Festival
Ah,
in the Marche. But Jennifer, my partner, and I went to Croatia last week, where the film screened to an audience of Camino leaders from 17 different European countries. Um, and I've got to say, Peter, it had a response that really knocked me sideways.
mm.
People started clapping at the beginning of the end credits, and they clapped all the way through the end credits. Um, it was incredible, really. And what that says to me is that the film has currency outside of Australia. It has relevance outside of Australia,
Mm.
because the film's just not about me or about this one Australian man. It kind of moves into a generic film, really, about the Camino spirit and the ethos of the Camino. And I think that's where it might have some relevance overseas.
Absolutely. I was thinking that myself, that that whole journey uh, is such an important one, and of course, it can apply to anyone. So, no, well done on that. Bill, just in concluding, I mean, you've made a number of really excellent films, and um, it's always intrigued me as to how you make decisions about the sorts of films that you make.
You know, Peter, that's a really, really important observation and question, because when you're an independent filmmaker, as I am and have been since 1982, in fact, I've done nothing since 1982 other than be an independent filmmaker.
Mm,
Um, and so what that means is that when you make a choice about whether or not you're going to do a movie, you have to understand that that's probably going to take at least 5 years of your life, minimum, and sometimes longer. Now, this film has taken 7 years of my life,
mm.
but I go back to films that I've done like Kiss or Kill, which took 10 years to get made.
Ooh.
So what that means is that you've got to make your choices very carefully. Is this something that you want to live with, not only for the duration of the making of the film, but then afterwards as well? Is this something that you want to have your name to? Because I take that very seriously. And I take the notion of being a filmmaker very seriously, because this is why I've never really worked in television, because film is film lasts. Film is important. And I do regard film as being an art form as well. I mean, I'm conscious that, it has to appeal to an audience. And if you want to keep making films, then more often than not, you've got to, you got to make something that people want to see.
Mm.
Um, but the choice that you make in deciding to do a film is huge. And I don't go into it lightly. I give it a lot of thought. But like I say, this film was not a film that I set out to make initially. But when I found a way to tell the story, being this way of not being personally aligned with the central character, um, then I thought, well, this could actually be fun to, it could be fun to make, but it also could be saying something quite important, you know? And look, I'm at this point in my life now where I just don't want to, I don't want to make mindless thrillers. I don't want to make mindless romantic comedies. Every film that I do now, I want to have some meaning behind it, because I'm at this point in my life now where I'm counting back. When I was doing Kids or Kill and Spider and Rose and The
Mm.
Nugget and these films, I wasn't even thinking about forward movement. Now I'm thinking about how many films do I have left in my life to make, and each one I have to be able to stand by and say, look, I'm proud to make this film. I have to say that I look at that film and I am proud to have made it.
Well done on that, Bill. Have you got plans for another one at the moment?
I do. I was up at 4 o'clock this morning writing it,
Ah.
and I'll tell you what it is. It's called The Way, Her Way.
Ah.
And it's a female perspective on the Camino,
Ah.
because there's only been two English language movies made on the Camino. One is the Martin Sheen film called The Way,
Yep.
which was made in 2011, and my film. But both of them they have a male perspective.
Mm.
And I've been thinking it would be really interesting to do a film with a female perspective, because more women than men walk the Camino.
Ah.
The statistics are such that it's only a small percentage. It's a variation of about 4 or 5%. But more women walk the Camino. And if you look at all the Facebook groups, there are more women members in Camino Facebook groups than men
Mm.
by quite a big degree. So and this audience hasn't really been catered for in a movie. And so that's what I'm doing.
What a great idea and what a terrific plan. And I'm looking forward to seeing that film already. So well done on that, Bill. We've been speaking to Bill Bennett, who's the writer-director of The Way, My Way, now screening in Australian cinemas. Bill, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much.
I'll be talking to you too, Peter. Thank you.
Okay, all the best. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Peter. Bye-bye.